When you log into the Flix client, the homepage displays the shows you have access to. Let's set up a brand new show. A tracking code is a unique ID that you use internally to keep track of shows. Sometimes it's a code word or a production number, whichever fits best with your company's naming conventions. Here you can write the show title, log line, and select an image if you want. The next window guides you through the setup. Here you set your show's frame rate with all the common film and television frame rates. Aspect ratio 1.77, which is 16:9, and there are also the cinema aspect ratios available. You can also set whether the show is episodic or one-off. You can go back and change these at a later date, but it's best to avoid altering fundamentals like frame rate and especially aspect ratio, as they obviously have such an integral role in your pipeline. The final part of the setup is the permissions page. The default is the administrator, but you can also use this page to give access to groups if you've created them. Creating groups of users makes sure the right people have access to your show and no one working on other shows. Click Create, and now you can see our show is on the homepage. If I roll over it, I can see the log line. If I click on this submenu, I can open up the settings. We'll go through them later. First, let's take a look at the hierarchy of a show in Flix. This toolbar is called the breadcrumb. You'll see why in a moment. The first page is your sequences page. Story sequences are listed here. So for example, in this show we've created previously, you can see I've named this sequence Inciting Incident, as our story panels covered that story beat. Of course it takes place in Act 1, and here I've added a comment. I click here and you can see a list of revisions. These are all the instances where a change was made to the sequence. This is the oldest version, and if I go back in the breadcrumb, I can access the list again to see the newest version. See, there's some new panels added there. So going back in the breadcrumb to the sequences level, I can create a new one. I enter the tracking code of our sequence, the title, we'll call it Act 1 Climax. Specify the act, and then click Create. If my show is episodic, the option on this page is to create a new episode. There I enter the episode number and go from there. Now we're ready to set up our artists to work in Photoshop. To set up Photoshop with Flix, you need to go into Preferences, which you can access from the File menu. Skip down to Third-Party Apps and set the default to Photoshop in the drop-down. Now you also need to go into the Photoshop tab here and point Flix to which version of Photoshop you want to use. It's usually in program files on Windows or applications on Mac. Now you also want to install the Photoshop plugins, and we'll see why that's important in a moment. Click Install and that will take a few seconds to complete. Before your artists can send work back from Photoshop, there needs to be a revision set up. So for example, in my fictional drama about jiu-jitsu, I've created an episode, sequence, but there are yet to be any revisions. So I click Clean Version to create a new one, and here is where all my storyboards will appear. Let's open up Photoshop to see how this works. You'll see now that the Flix tools are open because we installed the plugins. In case they ever get switched off, they're also available up in Window and then Extensions. I'm going to create a new template based on the specs of my show. For example, my drama is cinematic in style, so it's being planned for a 2.39:1 aspect ratio. Click New Template and you'll see the masking area there matches the aspect ratio of the show. So now when an artist creates a new panel, it gets sent straight to Flix when they click Current Image. In the next video, we'll go more into how artists use Photoshop with Flix. Thanks for watching.